Right now, your brain is actually actively lying to you.
Oh, absolutely. It's happening constantly.
Yeah. I mean, think about what happens if you just go to the freezer and pick up a piece of ice. Almost instantly, your nervous system sounds this massive alarm, right? It tells you that something called cold is aggressively invading your hand.
Right, but from a strictly scientific standpoint, um, cold doesn't actually exist.
Wait, really? Not at all.
Not at all. I mean, it is not a substance. It's not some invisible force, and it certainly isn't like invading your body. It's essentially just a biological illusion.
It's so funny how a concept we all learn in grade school still feels completely backwards to how our bodies actually experience it.
Yeah, we're really at the mercy of our biology there.
We are, and that disconnect is exactly what we are getting into in today's deep dive. We're looking at this fascinating guide from our source material on how to answer deceptively simple questions.
Right. Specifically, why is fire hot and why is ice cold?
Exactly. And the source breaks down how to explain this to children at different developmental stages, ages 3, 6, and 9.
And to be clear for everyone listening, our goal here isn't to just like read a parenting manual to you.
Right. No, we're using these children's questions as a springboard. It's a way to understand the foundational mechanics of the universe for ourselves.
Because to explain a concept to a kid, you really have to strip away the academic jargon that we adults often hide behind. I mean, it forces you to understand the actual physics.
Oh, 100%. So we are going to operate on two tracks today. We will look at the elegantly simple ways to explain these concepts to a child, but we're also going to dig into the high-level adult mechanics.
Thermodynamics, evolutionary biology, all of it.
Yeah, and the sheer weirdness of human sensory perception.
It's honestly a brilliant exercise in communication because it tracks so perfectly with how human cognition evolves. I mean, you start with survival, you move to mechanics, and then you end up with abstract science.
Well, let's jump right into that first stage then, like the earliest cognitive baseline. When we look at how to approach a 3-year-old asking about fire and ice, the foundational rule is that they do not need to hear a single word about molecules or energy transfer.
Oh, absolutely not. That would just be entirely lost on them.
Right. You anchor the explanation completely in tactile reality. The script from the source is delightfully stark. It's just fire gives off lots of heat, so it feels very hot. Ice has very little heat, so it feels cold.
Which is entirely accurate for their level of perception, you know?
Yeah, it's just the basic facts.
At 3 years old, abstract concepts don't just, like, go over their heads. The neural pathways required to process abstract invisible forces haven't even fully myelinized yet.
Oh, wow. So it's a physical limitation in the brain.
Exactly. Their brain is essentially an engine built purely for physical navigation and survival.
And that leads right into the safety connection the source makes. You explain that because fire has so much heat, it can burn us. Because ice has so little, it can actually make our hands hurt if we hold it too long.
Right. It always comes back to keeping them safe.
I kept thinking of an analogy here. Explaining this to a 3-year-old is essentially like putting up the bumpers at a bowling alley.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like you aren't teaching them the rotational physics of the ball's momentum or, the oil patterns on the lane. You are just keeping the ball out of the gutter so they get a feel for the game without getting hurt.
Yeah, the bumper analogy works really well for the intent of the parent, but let's look at the mechanism of the child's brain for a second.
Okay, let's do it.
Those bunkers work because they rely on immediate physical feedback. The brain at that stage is wired for cause and effect on a purely biological, nociceptive level.
Nociceptive. Those are the pain receptors, right?
Precisely. They're the sensory neurons that respond to damaging or potentially damaging stimuli. So the 3-year-old doesn't need to understand the molecular vibration of the fire.
They just need to not touch it.
Right. They need their brain to map the visual of a flame to the biological imperative of self-preservation. By linking the object to physical pain or intense heat, you are satisfying the brain's most primitive requirement, which is surviving the environment.
That makes total sense. So once a child masters how to avoid pain, that survival imperative is essentially satisfied, which creates this cognitive vacuum.
They get curious.
Exactly. They stop asking, how do I not get hurt? And they start asking, what is actually happening here? And that brings us right to the 6-year-old's cognitive leap into mechanics.
Yeah, this is where a child's obsession with cause and effect really takes off. They start to realize the world isn't just a static painting, it's a machine.
And this is where we introduce the concept of heat transfer. The explanation evolves. We say, fire is hot because it is releasing energy.
Right, like when wood or a candle burns.
Exactly. And ice feels cold because it lacks heat. But the crucial shift here is movement. We explain that heat naturally likes to move from warmer things to cooler things.
That's a huge conceptual step.
It is. The source says to tell them, when you touch ice, your warm hand is sharing its warmth with the ice.
I love that. You are personifying energy just enough for them to grasp it. Heat basically becomes a traveler.
It's beautiful phrasing, but I do have to push back a little on how humans actually process this in real life. As simple as heat travels sounds, it goes entirely against our natural intuition.
Oh, completely. It defies common sense.
Right. Even as adults, our everyday language completely betrays the actual physics. Think about the classic thing a parent yells when a kid leaves the front door open in December.
Oh, shut the door. You're letting the cold in.
Yes, the great myth of the incoming winter villain.
We constantly anthropomorphize cold as this aggressive entity breaking into the house.
Right. But according to basic thermodynamics, you aren't letting the cold in. You are actually letting the heat out. We have it completely backwards.
We do, and it's because we are misinterpreting a fundamental law of physics, the second law of thermodynamics, which deals with entropy.
Okay, unpack entropy for us a bit.
Well, the universe absolutely hates imbalance. If you have a concentration of energy, like a heated house, and you expose it to an environment with very little energy, like the freezing outdoors.
The heat wants to escape.
Exactly. The energy will always aggressively spread out to try and reach an equilibrium.
So the heat from the radiator isn't being pushed back by the cold air. The heat is basically rushing out the open door to try and warm up the entire neighborhood.
That's exactly it. Heat is the only active participant in that exchange. Cold is scientifically meaningless as an active force.
It's just a lack of heat.
Right, it's just a vacuum. It is an absence waiting to be filled.
So how does introducing this specific idea of heat as a traveler actually rewire a kid's brain?
Well, it shifts their worldview from static objects to dynamic interactions. They stop seeing ice as this magical glowing rock that shoots freezing beams into their hand.
Which is definitely how it feels.
Right, but they start seeing it as a participant in an exchange. The ice is merely receiving the warmth from their hand. It's a profound realization because it teaches them that everything in the universe is constantly interacting.
Which naturally sets up the next domino to fall. Because once they understand that heat is something that moves, they are inevitably going to ask, well, what exactly is moving?
Right. What is the heat actually made of?
Exactly. And that drops us right into the deep end of the pool. The 9-year-olds leap into literal, invisible science.
Yeah, at age 9, cognitive development reaches a point where children can actually hold abstract, invisible systems in their minds. They are ready for the actual scientific realities.
And there are 3 major mechanical concepts to unpack here from the source. The first is particles. We introduce the idea that absolutely everything is made of tiny moving particles.
Right.
When an object is hot, its particles are vibrating or moving incredibly fast. When it's cold, they are moving much more slowly.
This is kinetic energy. And you're asking a 9-year-old to look at a solid, completely still block of ice and imagine it vibrating on a microscopic level. I mean, it is a massive conceptual leap.
It really is. And the second concept redefines the fire. We move away from fire gives off heat to the actual mechanism. Fire is a chemical reaction, specifically called burning or combustion, that is releasing a massive amount of energy.
Right.
But let's dig into the adult mechanics of that for a second. Why does burning actually release heat? We always say, it releases energy.
Well,
but what is physically happening?
Well, it comes down to the chemical bonds between atoms. You can think of atomic bonds kind of like tiny coiled springs that hold the atoms together.
Okay, coiled springs, got it, right.
Okay, so when you have fuel, like a piece of wood, and you introduce enough heat and oxygen, a chemical reaction occurs. The existing bonds in the wood and the oxygen are broken, and the atoms rapidly rearrange themselves to form new, much more stable molecules, like carbon dioxide and water vapor.
And the heat comes from that rearranging process.
Exactly. Making those new, stable bonds requires far less energy than what was stored in the old tense bonds. So you have all this leftover energy.
And the universe doesn't just delete it.
No, it has to go somewhere. So it violently radiates outward as kinetic energy, which makes the surrounding particles vibrate faster, causing heat, and it releases photons, which is the light we see as the flame.
That is just fascinating. So the fire isn't a thing. It's the visible event of atoms upgrading their stability and throwing away the excess energy.
Precisely. It is an event, not an object.
Wow. Okay, that brings us to the third concept for the 9-year-old, which gets back to our opening hook, the illusion of cold.
This is my favorite part.
Yeah, we tell the kid explicitly, ice isn't making cold. Heat flows from your warm hand to the ice, and your brain just notices the heat leaving your skin. Therefore, cold is just the word we use for having less heat.
This bridges physics and biology in such a clever way.
I actually have a financial analogy for this that I think helps conceptualize it, at least for the absence part. Heat is basically like money, right? And cold is just the state of being broke.
Okay, let's test that out.
Well, you can't give someone your brokenness.
No, you definitely can't.
Brokenness is not a physical currency you can hand over. You can only give them your money. And when you give them your money, it leaves you with less. So when you touch ice, you are handing over your heat money. Your brain rings an alarm bell saying, hey, our bank account is draining rapidly.
That's a great way to put it.
And that biological alarm bell is what we call feeling cold.
The financial analogy works perfectly for understanding the absence of heat. The ice isn't transferring its broke status to you, it's just a very eager recipient of your wealth.
Right.
But to really understand the mechanics of the transfer, let's add another layer. Instead of money, think of heat transfer as a crowded room full of people dancing wildly. That's your warm hand.
Okay, the fast-moving particles.
Right. Now imagine an adjoining room where everyone is just standing perfectly still, shoulder to shoulder. That's the ice.
Okay.
If you open the door between the rooms, the wildly dancing people are going to start violently bumping into the people standing still. By bumping into them, they force the still people to start moving.
Right, they kind of infect them with the dancing.
Exactly. But the dancers also lose some of their own momentum in the collision. Eventually, the whole crowd is just swaying at the exact same medium pace.
They hit equilibrium. The fast particles literally battered the slow particles into moving faster, and they lost their own speed in the process.
Exactly. And your biological awe from earlier is entirely justified when we look at how our bodies interpret those collisions. We have thermoreceptors in our skin.
Okay.
But evolutionary biology didn't design these receptors to be absolute thermometers. They don't tell you the exact temperature of an object.
Wait, they don't.
No, they are designed to be rate of change detectors.
What does that actually mean in practice, though?
It means your brain only cares about how fast you are losing or gaining heat. So if you touch a piece of metal and a piece of wood that are sitting in the same room...
The metal feels colder.
Right, but they are the exact same temperature. The metal just conducts heat away from your hand faster than the wood does. Your thermoreceptors measure that rapid departure of energy, fire off a signal via your nervous system, and your brain translates that subtle loss as the sharp, painful sensation of cold.
That is just wild to realize. It's an evolutionary warning system designed to keep you from losing your core body heat.
Exactly.
The sensation of cold is literally just our brain registering a departure, a biological farewell to our own kinetic energy. And, teaching that to a 9-year-old is so powerful because you're giving them the tools to look past their immediate sensory illusions.
You are teaching them that their perception of reality is subjective, but the physics of reality are objective.
So we have scaled this absolute mountain of physics. We've gone from tactile warmth and bowling bumpers to entropy and chemical bonds, all the way to the biological illusions of our thermoreceptors.
We really covered some ground.
We did.
Yeah.
But we have to take a step back and remember why this information is structured the way it is in the source material.
The human element.
Right. Because none of this happens in a vacuum. It is an interaction between a person asking a question and a person answering it. And that brings us to the psychology of curiosity.
Yeah, the materials we are referencing take a very intentional shift here.
They do. It moves away from the mechanics of science and toward the emotional context of these interactions.
And this is incredibly relevant for adults listening, whether you're talking to a child, a colleague, or really anyone trying to learn something new.
There is this gentle reassurance provided in the text. It explicitly reminds the adult that curiosity doesn't arrive one question at a time.
Never.
Today's question about fire and ice will inevitably become tomorrow's questions about stars, weather, or the scale of the universe itself.
Oh yeah, the why phase never really ends.
Right. But here is the most profound piece of advice it offers. It says, you do not have to turn every single question into a rigorous science lesson.
Which is such an immense relief.
It really is. Sometimes a child isn't actually demanding a mechanical explanation. They are simply inviting you to wonder alongside them.
Yes.
And that shared, thoughtful conversation is infinitely more memorable than delivering a flawless, textbook-perfect explanation. But there is specific guidance on the delivery that I found absolutely fascinating.
Oh, have so.
Because it feels almost like podcast production instructions, but applied to daily parenting.
Podcast instructions. That's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. The text suggests consciously using a warm, calm, and emotionally reassuring voice. It literally advises adults to speak slowly and naturally, to add gentle pauses after important sentences to let the concepts breathe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and to avoid sounding theatrical or overly sad or childish. It emphasizes keeping the interaction intimate and kind of cinematic, and strictly avoiding medical or academic language unless the child specifically asks for it.
That's incredibly specific advice.
It is. And most importantly, it says to never shame, frighten, or dismiss the child for asking.
You know, if we look closely at those directives, they are really about adult emotional regulation.
How do you mean?
Well, when a child or anyone really asks a massive foundational question about the universe, it often triggers a weird, sudden anxiety in the adult.
Oh, definitely.
We feel this instantaneous burden of authority. We think, I am the adult, I should know how thermodynamics works. So by advising the adult to speak slowly, add pauses, and avoid theatricality, the text is essentially forcing the adult to regulate their own anxiety.
Oh, I see. It stops them from projecting their stress.
Exactly. It stops them from accidentally shutting down the child's curiosity out of their own insecurity.
Which leads me to ask, do adults sometimes ruin the magic of discovery entirely because we feel pressured to act like walking encyclopedias?
Oh, absolutely we do. When an adult feels the need to perform expertise, they end up bulldozing the interaction. They prioritize being right and sounding smart over actually connecting with the person asking the question.
Because it feels like a test.
Right, but a question isn't a pop quiz for the adult. It's an invitation to explore.
Yeah.
When you rush to give a dense, jargon-filled answer just to prove you know it, you sever that connection completely.
It's completely okay to just say, I don't know the exact mechanism behind that. Let's find out together.
It is more than okay. It is objectively the better response. When you say, I don't know, let's look it up, you are actually modeling the scientific method in real time.
That's a great point.
You're teaching them that ignorance isn't a failure or something to be ashamed of. It is the necessary starting point of all discovery. You are showing them how to seek knowledge, rather than conditioning them to just passively receive information from an authority figure. It's an incredibly empowering shift in dynamic.
And crucially, the guidance also mentions not presenting one family structure, culture, or experience as universal.
Oh, that's really important.
Yeah, meaning the way we experience warmth or gather around a fire or experience winter, it varies wildly across humanity. Keeping that perspective open prevents the science from feeling rigid and disconnected from the real world.
Because science is universal, but our human experience of it is diverse. Acknowledging that only deepens the curiosity.
So let's bring this all together for you, our listener. We have covered a lot of profound ground today, hiding inside a very simple question.
We started with the ultimate trick question and ended up basically deconstructing reality.
We really did. Let's recap the beautiful symmetry of the physics we've explored today. Fire reminds us that energy warms and brightens the world around us. It is the active releasing force, the breaking of bonds and the chaotic celebration of excess energy.
While ice reminds us that warmth can move from one place to another, it is the quiet, eager recipient in the great thermodynamic exchange.
Together, they teach one of science's biggest, most foundational ideas. The world is never static. It is always changing, particles are always moving, systems are always interacting, and every massive discovery about the universe begins with noticing something incredibly simple right in front of you.
It really is a perfect distillation of thermodynamics, wrapped entirely in a lesson on human connection.
And the relevance to you listening is undeniable. Whether you are currently trying to answer a toddler's never-ending questions, or you're trying to grasp the realities of entropy and energy transfer for yourself.
Or maybe you're just trying to be a better, more empathetic communicator at work or at home.
Exactly. The core lesson remains exactly the same.
Meet people exactly where they are cognitively. Build the foundation first.
Translate complex mechanics into tangible interactions, and never lose that fundamental sense of wonder that made you ask the question in the first place.
Because the facts will always be there in a textbook. The mechanics will always be measurable. But the wonder is what drives us to actually open the book.
Exactly. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. Something to take this invisible science out of the abstract and make it viscerally real for you. Later today or tomorrow, whenever you happen to hold a freezing cold glass of iced water or a cold beverage, I want you to try something.
A little practical experiment with your own sensory perception.
Yes. Don't just hold the glass and passively feel the cold. Try to actively visualize the science we talked about today. Feel the alarm bells ringing in your thermoreceptors, but know that they are lying to you.
Overrule your own biology.
Picture the heat, your actual kinetic energy, literally draining out of your fingertips. Visualize those fast-moving particles in your hand violently colliding with the glass, traveling through the condensation, and battering the slow-moving ice cubes inside until they begin to melt.
Realize that you're not just holding a drink.
You are an active, living participant in a massive thermodynamic exchange with your own beverage. The universe is moving energy around, seeking equilibrium, and you are right there in the middle of it, powering the reaction. Stay curious, keep wondering, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.